What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. My name is Braden Carlson.
My name is Taylor.
My name is Shane, or as you might know me, Postart.
And today we have a special guest for you. He's a man that is after a world of high-performance rocketry, has successfully flown rockets north of Mach 35 using only balsa and cardboard. Is that exaggerated enough for you?
Yeah, it was Mach 50.
Whoa. Okay, well,
Nice.
actually, this is Thomas the Booska. That's Boosk for those unfamiliar. And if you don't know, now you do. That's how that line goes. Thomas, you gave a presentation at Trey Tech.
Yeah,
What was it about?
This is that presentation. I showed up. I said, "Your rockets don't go fast enough. Here's how to make them go faster." I really only care for rockets that really go fast, or that people are learning with, one or the other. If you're not learning and you're not going fast, I don't see that much fun in it. So I wrote this presentation and I was like, this is a good way to introduce some folks that might have not been exposed to this world of just sending projectiles really, really, really fast. And presented at Trade Tech. A couple of people showed up. Some of my friends showed up. Some people that I've never met showed up and said, this is great. And some people said, this is cool. And now we're here on the world famous. How many listeners does this podcast have?
North of 35 million per hour, generally.
Okay. We're on this podcast with 36 million per minute.
Yeah, something along
Listeners.
those lines.
Yeah.
But okay, before we get into all this, why don't you give us a little bit of background, who you are, what you do, how you got into rocketry, and all of that, because generally with a guest, we ask them where they all got started in rocketry. So I feel like our due diligence is necessary here.
Yeah. So I've been doing rockets for only about 2.5 years. I got my L1 cert 2 years, 5 months ago. And before that, I knew that space was cool. I was majoring in aeronautical engineering originally in college, and then I switched to mechanical engineering because I thought that things that only flew were kind of okay, but I also wanted to do some mechanical design stuff. Before that, I was like, space is cool, but on the level of like, you see a picture of space and you think it's cool, and you see a rocket lifting off and you're like, that's kind of cool, but not like, I'm going to do that one day and I'm going to make it happen. I grew up in high school during when SpaceX was sort of coming to popularity. Falcon 9 was becoming a regular thing. Starship was just beginning. I would go back in my camera roll from like junior year of high school and see like the Starship belly flops and be like, oh, that was a cool memory, seeing that. And I went into college being like, it's cool, never done it before, never tried. I have some background in engineering. I built a thing or two here and there, but nothing serious. So why don't I try? In college, I went to those like club fairs that they have where they show off all the clubs. I looked around. I talked to a couple. I went to one intro meeting and I joined that club and have stuck with that club for the last 3 years or so. And that was the Rocketry Club in my school. The club, it was sort of bouncing back from COVID. That was in late 2022. So they had been back doing things for like 2 years. There was a lot of folks that were really interested in propulsion, especially on the liquid side. And so I got into that, but not very many that were into just like high power rockets. A lot of people that were there for engineering, and high power rockets to a lot of people, including me, kind of feel like a hobby sometimes. So it's kind of a little bit of a mashup of worlds. My first year of college, everyone decided for some reason that they want to get an L1 cert. Not for like, I'm going to do this to get a job or anything, but just like, I've never flown a rocket before and it sounds fun. And most of those people were juniors or seniors and were just getting back into it after COVID. I was a freshman and had really no conception of what pace I should be going at, or like how long it should take, or when I should be doing this, or I should be doing this in sophomore year or junior year. So I was just like, why don't I just start? I built my L1 rocket. It was a rocket like any other rocket, nothing special. It's just like a dual deploy rocket with a I motor that went, 3,000 feet. Flew that in January of 2023. in March, I had convinced them to give me money. Actually, no, I actually technically paid for that project. I convinced them to give me some like resources to build a little supersonic rocket. And our little joke was that it was like Snoop Dogg. There's no context for that. It's just called Snoop Dogg. And we did that. It went, I don't know, Mach 1.3 or something. Nothing crazy, but that was technically my second rocket. And then that got lost to the desert, got found a few months later. That summer, I decided, after a couple of other little forays into like IJ motors, that I want to go a little faster. So I built a near limit diameter rocket, flew it to 16,000. Still nothing crazy. Just, I don't know, a rocket that I couldn't see the whole flight with my eyes, which I thought that was a pretty decent size accomplishment for myself at the time. I was 18. Then that September, went to balls for the first time, did a level 3 rocket. The weekend, 2 weekends after that, flew a sub-minimum diameter L1000 rocket that folded the nose cone at about Mach 2.6. And then that December, flew a 2-stage rocket on a project I led at my school to about 43,000 feet, Mach 2.7. And that was an M to L, pretty decent sized 2-stage. Booster recovery, I don't know, the booster is still here. The sustainer was in a bag after we dug up its bits. And it currently is sitting in a state where there was a fin impaled through the avionics bay. So you can guess how that went.
Wow.
It came down at about 780 feet per second. So that was a little bit discouraging. And then at that point, I was like, I want to go higher, but more so to prove that I can do it and to get revenge against the recovery gods, and less as like a flex or like as a, I'm just going to go really high.
Very relatable.
Yeah.
I feel that pain.
And then during that time, I also decided I want to go faster and faster. I started paying less and less attention to the altitude and more attention to the Mach number. And I said, well, I want to do more Mach number than my GPA. So in January, kept doing that, glued some fins to another L1000, made it work that time, did about Mach 3. In April, I did a somewhat experimental motor. It was using Aerotech propellant. That's actually one of the subjects of this presentation. That was about Mach 3.6. And then I went off and then decided I wanted to go faster and that everything was lame. And I wanted to do hypersonic because I thought that would be kind of a funny meme. Went to balls, tried hypersonic, failed, did some solid motor development, came back, still on this train, and hopefully, in the next few months, I'll be able to get that one. That's sort of the next immediate goal for me on the solid side. I don't have a huge passion for solid motors or solid propulsion or solid rockets for work's sake. I am an engineering student, and this is mostly like a hobby of mine and like a passion project, not something to just like make a career out of. And then for the most part, my actual professional interest is liquid propulsion testing. Just if it's a liquid rocket engine, especially if it uses cryogenic propellants, I probably have some interest in it, and I probably want to test it. I like seeing fire. I like making it. Operations are kind of my strong suit, and we have fun with it. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into this and what I'm doing.
Awesome. I was gonna hit the clapping sound effects, but now I feel like it's too late. I've missed it.
Do it right now.
So I think yeah, you're right. Hold on. All right. So I met you for the first time at balls when you did your level 3. And actually, if people want to see your hypersonic attempt, there is actually if I do say so myself, quite good coverage of it in my balls video from last year, where we interviewed you before you did it. We were sitting at a camp full of people chatting very loudly while you were explaining your rocket to me, which always makes for the best audio. But yeah, it was a super cool attempt, and that's kind of, we get a lot of people asking us to do an episode on this podcast for getting into the world of high power or high performance rocketry. And it's always interesting seeing like the presentation and representation of college students at FAR like yourself that sort of arrived at this hobby because of professional interests one way or another. Because there's no, with college students, especially the ones that show up at FAR, there's no like, I built a Lock 4 and I flew a G80 and I'm like, this is cool and I'm having fun and maybe someday I'll fly something high and fast. It's always like, I'm going to just fly this L1000 with the fin can glued to it and it's going to go Mach 3. So you're very inspirational, Thomas. And the N1000 rocket that I flew at Balls last year was after watching you and all the other college kids just kind of like, I don't want to say slap stuff together and it just kind of works, but it put me a lot more at ease for how like non-eventful going Mach 2 is, which is fast. It's still very fast. I understand that, but I was like, I'm walking over ground that has been treaded on so much that like teenage engineering students are building rockets the night before that go this fast and it's fine. So I think I'm in okay territory here. But that does sort of segue us to your presentation, which takes you well beyond that territory into much scarier speeds. But before we do that, Shane or Taylor, anything to add or ask?
Not really.
Yeah, not at this moment.
We got it pretty covered.
Is there going to be a segment on tip to tip in this, Thomas?
No. You know what I think about that?
I do, yeah. It's well, unfortunately we can't say on the podcast in the interest of keeping it, but is it tip to S or S to tip? I can't remember which one every time.
The second one.
Gotcha. Well, you'll be happy to know that I've changed my mind on that once again on my N1560. I'm not doing it anymore.
Oh, fire. Okay. I approve.
No tip to tip, dude. But I am going almost Mach 3. So I do want to note here for those that are just listening, I know we have to give this disclaimer a lot. Thomas has a presentation that will be on screen for the video viewers. If you want to check it out, go to the Anti-Gravity Group podcast YouTube channel. It's just called the Anti-Gravity Group. However, I did preface and request that Thomas sort of optimize for audio only. Okay, so we do have you all in mind. And we're going to try our hardest, okay? That's what we're here for. Okay.
Oh.
I think on that note, Thomas, the floor is yours.
All right. So, first of all, trying my hardest means that I loaded up the presentation about 3 minutes before I started. And it is the same as the Tech one because apparently it worked. However, I am going to say a lot more and show a lot less. And try to do a lot of verbal explanations. So don't leave quite yet, or leave. Do whatever you want.
No, don't leave. Don't leave.
Oh, okay. I don't know what I'm supposed to say here. One other thing on the note that you had in the beginning, a lot of the folks that are doing it out at FAR, it's a mentality of, it's a mix of fooling around and very, 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 very sophisticated fooling around. But it is still a little bit of fooling around. It is absolutely not the epitome of we're going to do perfect engineering. We're going to optimize every last ounce of it. We're going to make it work as good as it possibly could. And there's a lot more of, we just want it to work. We want it to get across the finish line. We want to finish the project, learn, and get to the next one. And that's sort of the context for this presentation, is that this isn't how to build the best rocket. This isn't how to build a perfect rocket. This is how to build a pretty okay functioning rocket that can, go about as fast as a Sidewinder. So it's sort of that context that we live in. Out at FAR, a lot of us are very focused on speed because speed happens to be a lot cheaper than going high. Braden, you've gone much higher than I have. I mean, successfully. But the speed, you can build rockets on even the 38 millimeter scale that are busting Mach 3 with commercial motors. So it's something that's, in my opinion, pretty easy to get into, especially if you have some engineering background or if you're a student or something like that for relatively low cost. All these rockets cost much less than my L3 rocket did.
Yeah. I was actually going to say that is a good point too, in that like the stuff that you guys do, it's like a lot of solar sleeves and DMS motors with stuff glued to them. So like you're almost building rockets for the cost of the motor and like an easy mini. Yeah. But Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm like discrediting the things that are happening at FAR, because you guys sort of have found like this perfect balance of what you can and can't get away with, because we've seen plenty of rockets at rocket launches built by people who are fairly experienced in the world of like general high power rocketry that you could look at from 10 miles away and go, that thing's going to fold in half. And it's so obviously not thought out. On the flip side, you guys are doing things where you could argue that there's corners cut, but there is thought put into it where those corners can be cut. And sometimes the limits get pushed, right? You push the envelope, you're going to find the edge of the table. I don't know if that's saying, but if it is, it's going on a shirt. That's mine. Nobody take that. But yeah, so I forgot what I was saying. Go on.
Yeah.
I remembered.
Oh,
sorry. I was going to point out real quick that this is also a fun genre for people that want to build high performance rockets that don't have a lot of waver. Because, like, a 38 millimeter rocket that goes Mach 3 is probably going to go 10,000 feet, if even.
Yeah. There's a certain 38 millimeter rocket built by Alex Patchers that went Mach 5.5 at 6,000 feet. So if you have an experimental waver and you just kind of don't really care, you can do some very, very different things.
For those unaware, Alex Patras, if you go on the Rocketry forum and look up the fins that were made with compressed hair as if they were composite laminate, that is Alex. So that's the level of just putting it in a box and shipping it we're dealing with when we talk about Alex. But
yeah. Those fins are still in the back of my car. So yeah.
Gross.
It's on the floor. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Before I actually start, one last asides. You kind of touched on this, but a lot of these rockets, it's literally like, it is the lowest. It is in a way the simplest rocket you can build with a given motor. It is less parts. It is simpler parts. It is often absolutely just like stupid construction techniques that you look at it and you're like, how does that work? And it just kind of does. And a lot of that is because simplicity breeds, and I'll cover this too more in depth. Simplicity makes a lot of systems have higher performance. Like if I literally have less rocket, I don't have a body tube, I just glue it on, I have a simpler system, and inherently, because I have less components and less weight and less drag, I have a higher performing rocket. So the optimum for performance often ends up at scarily simple. A lot of people, they think performance and they think that they need to build a Black Brant or a sounding rocket or something like that. But on the amateur side, a lot of the very high performance rockets end up with comparatively shocking simplicity. But yeah. And yeah, I guess I should probably start right now.
Fire away. Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the screen if you're looking, or turn your ears. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Booska.
First thing to know about me, my AAA L3 number starts with a 25,000, so I'm basically like 3 years old. Table of contents, this was built in a world where people didn't introduce me, which is kind of crazy. So the About Me section, gonna kind of skip. Cardinal rules, this is the 7 sort of things that everything else flows down from. This is how I set up my thought process when I'm designing a rocket, building a rocket, getting away with stuff. The next thing, software, tools, and simulation. I'm going to roast you a little bit, Braden, on that one. Don't worry. Design elements, some common design elements that I try, or that I found to work good in this kind of rocket. Ways to simplify, ways to shrink, ways to make it lighter. Manufacturing methods, some of the aforementioned kind of funny manufacturing methods that we do. I have a design example in here, which is going to be great if you're a visual listener, and not as good if you're an audio watcher. So yeah. And then on the last bit, I have some work on optimization, basically how to push it a step further. Worth noting, when you try to push it a step further than this, your success rate also goes significantly down. So that is why the bulk of the presentation is not about that. This is a reference. This is a recommendation of methods. It is a starting point. but it isn't a tutorial. Don't just do this and immediately do it with no other context. This isn't the absolute highest performing thing that you can do. This isn't a guarantee of success. It isn't just exhaustive description of methods. There are absolutely more ways to do this and more ways to skin the cat. And it isn't a replacement for experience. So, the best way to learn is by doing. The best way to learn is go out, fly something, figure it out, put your hands on it, and work from there. About me, this is, I don't know, some things about me, most of which have been said. My hobby interest is mostly in fire. And yeah, there are a couple of cool things that I've had the privilege of working on. Top right is my L3. Top left, that was the two-stage rocket. That's a pencil, and trust me, if I could go back and design that rocket again, it would be different in almost every way. Bottom right, just a little tidbit. I had the honor of putting my hands on some engines that went to space, so that is quite cool. And they also make really pretty fire. This is the timeline that I mentioned earlier. In 2022, I first started all of this. In 2023, I basically said I had to do all my certs. 2024, I said I had to go fast. And this year, I basically said I have to make all my own motors and go faster.
Well, you better slow down or the certification police are going to come for you. They tried to come for Taylor, too.
For not doing enough flights?
No, Taylor did all 3 of his certs in one weekend.
Oh, yeah.
You have to get all kinds of experience before you dare go to the next cert level, Thomas. Should be decades.
Yeah, but potentially decades before I get a Mach 3.7.
Ooh, foreshadowing.
That's pushing it. Yeah. But yeah, I've been doing a big part of this for me in the past year or so has become experimental motors, and I started doing that in 2024. And that mostly came from me wanting even higher performance and me also wanting to have more complete control over the rocket. It's most common that you're building or that you're buying a motor to fit your rocket and not that you're building a motor to fit your requirements. So it's been a nice journey and also a very freeing one, getting to play with grain geometries, optimize whatever I want to optimize for, build higher performing motors that I can buy. And yeah, the next thing to cover are what are, in my opinion, 7 rules that set you on a decent path to success on this kind of thing. And I will unfortunately have to read all of them out. The first is to optimize your architecture before you optimize your components. The lowest hanging fruit optimizations are in how you package your rocket, how you set it up, your overall architecture. It isn't on trying to cut weight on an eye bolt or using thinner Kevlar or using a smaller parachute or cutting redundancy in your avionics or anything like that. The biggest thing is deleting a body tube, deleting a recovery bay, gluing a fin to a motor, making a shorter total section. And a lot of people are even at the stage of going from like through the wall fins to minimum diameter. If you can cut all of that space and all of that weight, that's a lot of optimization for very, very little effort, very, very little work. And
yeah, I mean, we still run into seeing like minimum diameter rockets that have an electronics bay coupler and then like an empty tube with the nose cone sitting on top of it for some reason. Like, you remember the mongooses, Taylor? Mongoose?
Yeah, it's a waste of time. I mean, to be blunt about it.
Yeah, the payload bays, we gotta quit it, people. Like, especially with like,
if you're gonna do it, at least kind of
do it all the way.
Yeah.
You don't need an extra 4-foot tube or a 2-foot tube or any tube. Just put the nose cone on, go.
Especially with the plethora of off-the-shelf parachutes that pack really small. So
yeah, and rip really easy.
That's right.
Sorry, Thomas, go ahead.
If you have... I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say you're not used to the peanut gallery in this presentation. Last time
peanuts.
Everyone sat respectfully and didn't talk at you. We're not respectful around here. Sorry about
me
all
neither.
that.
Yeah, sorry.
But not really, actually.
I don't know. 80-20 rule, everyone has probably heard about this at this point, but it's like, if you do 20% of the work, you're probably 80% of the way to the optimal result. and that very much applies here. My rockets, I built a rocket in 2 days once that did about Mach 3.3. It was the same weekend where Braden and Taylor were launching their 2-stage, and they were trying to integrate their ignition wires while I was putting my fins on my rocket. So
and did you still fly before us? Because that would make sense.
I flew a minute after you.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I would have flown before you if my igniter worked.
Well, I was gonna say that one isn't particularly our fault, but that's all we have to get into with that.
That I will concede that. Also, you had an extra stage, so I can't really compete.
No, it's a 1-to-1 comparison. It was still one rocket, so
no. But yeah, on that, very very little optimization work was done. I did almost no math. I looked at the fins and I said that's stable. The stability margin was like 20%, which is a lot of cals for people that think in cals. The nose cone coupler was an 1/8-inch thick machined aluminum block. The fins were way too thick. The casing was way too thick. Everything was way too thick. But I did, I don't know, 20% of the effort with me and another friend, and 80% of the reward, which was a rocket that came back and went fast, came back to us. The third thing, compromise assembly and integration as a last avenue. I'm not one for hammering nose cones onto rockets to try to get parachutes in. I'm not one for, like standing on that. I'm not one for spending 7 hours trying to integrate my avionics bay.
You'll stand on business, but not on a rocket.
Yeah, I'll stand on my feet.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll stand on my feet on top of the mountain when I recover and pop my main at apogee.
Okay, wow. Well, listen.
And yeah, it's most of the gains that you'll get don't come from that like last 1% of optimization that makes your life terrible. If I can't integrate my avionics bay in like an hour or two, I've probably done something terribly wrong. If I can't build my entire rocket in about 20 hours of work, I've probably gone too far. And everything is in search of the easiest solution to put together. The next thing, control every component and subsystem as tightly as you can. A lot of the failures in these kinds of rockets come in uncontrolled areas. So, for example, using commercial composite parts. You send a rocket Mach 3.5, no commercial composite's going to really like that. And they're not built for that. They're built for, Mach 2s and, building rockets that are pretty much in the mainstream. But no one builds rockets or components for rockets that can do Mach 5 for composites per se. So if you can control more of your areas, know where the limits of your components are, know where you have to make your own components and bite those bullets, that gets you a lot of chance of success. The next thing, simplification, reduce part count, and ease of manufacturing are not always the same. Some of y'all that listen to too many podcasts by a certain CEO of a certain space company would probably be like, oh, the best part is no part. Reduce everything down to like one part. Build your entire rocket out of one single part ever. But if you try to do that, you end up with stuff that's very, very hard to manufacture, stuff that's hard to put together and integrate. And a lot of the time, it's useful to split those things up. So don't get too trapped in one very simple way of thinking.
That's actually a bad time for me to announce my next project. It's a billet aluminum minimum diameter rocket. It only weighs 19 pounds, and I'm flying it on an M.
I'll show you guys something after the podcast. And yeah, the next thing, well, optimizations are on your system level. For example, in your architecture, a lot of the failures are in details. It is, I broke my Kevlar, I broke an eye bolt, a fin fell off because I forgot to account for flutter. It's, my recovery system didn't deploy because my black powder charge wasn't sized properly. You could have an otherwise perfect rocket, but you need every part of it to work, and you are asking for failures. Yeah. Last thing, I touched on this a little bit already. Commercial hardware is limited. It is not faultless. Do not take anyone's, this is indestructible for, face value. Try to make sure, verify, have some sort of evidence, which could be prior flight testing. It could be other people trying it and it works. And make sure that what you're doing on a component level is not crazy. I got bit by that once. I flew a nose cone higher than it was able to do in terms of speed, and it snapped in half, and then my recovery got pooped out, and then I didn't have a rocket anymore.
Does that sound familiar to you at all, Taylor?
Yeah, a little. I mean, it's a little familiar.
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, just like imagine, for instance, Thomas, if you were going to fly a 2-stage, we'll say M to K, and made some simulation mistakes, which you've already alluded to, and your rocket accidentally went an entire speed of sound faster than you thought it was going to.
Okay, it was not an entire.
That's quite an oversight, if I may say so myself.
The other oversight is maybe the worst looking nose cone I've ever seen.
Well, I didn't make it, but that's all I'll say about that.
I wouldn't happen to know anyone that has ever done that.
Yeah, that would be really stupid and dumb.
We don't know anyone like that either. So
can't imagine. Anyway, Thomas, you have some more things for us?
Yeah. All right. So simulation software. I am kind of simple. I'm not big into I'm gonna make my own, whatever the cool kids are doing these days, simulation software, and try to make the perfect simulation software. I need to know that it's stable. I need to know how high it's going, plus minus 5%, 10%. I'd like to know how fast it's going. I'd really like to know, again, that it's stable. And those are really the things that I care about. RAS Arrow, it's great for aerodynamics. It tells great stability plots. It tells great altitude and Mach number predictions. It's based on missile DATCOM, and it's just a very, very good simulation. But OpenRocket, it's great for rocket design. You can put mass properties in there. You can say, I have a nose cone that's this thick. How much is it going to weigh? And it does a lot of that math. That's very simple. But it does that behind the hood. So it's just a very seamless way to design a rocket. So my workflow is sort of to lay out the rocket in OpenRocket, get my CG, get my mass properties, figure out how big it needs to be to fit my parachutes. And then I transfer that to RAS Arrow, optimize my fins, see, how sensitive it is to different things like my CG or my fin size or my fin shape, or my rocket weight. And then I sort of enter a cycle of iteration. I have something I want based off of my RAS Arrow. I make it happen in the OpenRocket, go back, simulate it again, redo the cycle over and over and over again until I'm happy with something. In past times, I would do this for, days or weeks. Nowadays, I mostly just put it in OpenRocket once, send it to RAS Arrow, good enough, just kind of fly it. But it's something that kind of takes time to get a feel for. For example, one exercise is if you can look at a rocket and look at its fins and just say that is stable or that is unstable, you're in a good place. But that intuition takes some time to get. These are some mostly empirical stability targets. This is not biblical. This is not perfect. But the first thing, stability, above 12% at all points. If you're listening to this podcast, you may or may not know what percent is. Percent is the distance between your CG and your CP divided by the total body or rocket length, and then expressing that as a percentage. So stability greater than 12% is nice. CN alpha greater than 10 at all speeds of flight is nice. CN alpha is a measure of how much force you have restoring your rocket if you go off of the vertical axis or off of the axis that you're flying. For example, say you're going vertical, you have something come and push your rocket. Now you're going 2 degrees off of vertical. How hard are your fins on your rocket correcting and getting you back to vertical? That's what CNA is measuring. Of course, bigger, usually better, get more restoring force. Fin span is pretty hotly debated, but I personally like 1.25 times the body diameter between your root cord and your tip cord. And then
What happened? Sorry.
And then the length of your tip cord, I usually do something like 0.3 times the root cord. Again, very hotly debated. Some people do no tip cord. I've done 0 tip cord. Some people basically square fins. But yeah, mostly up to you. Roxim, we don't do that here. So, yeah.
Hit it, Braden. Yeah, there we go.
Listen, we've defended this in the past, okay? But it's just because we're old, Thomas, all right? Back in our day, we didn't have open rocket or sarsaparilla parlors like you kids like to go to.
I'm with you, Thomas. I've only ever known open rocket.
We're just so hard-headed.
Old.
Yeah.
Old. The word is
It's
old.
what we grew up with. And I like watching the fun little 3D animation. It's fun. It's nice.
Yeah,
It's
but
only
then
$110.
then it lies about how fast your rocket's going and how high it's going.
Well, semantics, you run into certain stuff. But I do want to, the stability is a great point to talk about because we've on this podcast thrown people under the bus for the whole, if you're going supersonic, you need 2 calibers of stability static. Like, as if this is written in stone, or really in general that X caliber of stability is written in stone for supersonic flight. This is a way better metric to be looking at, and that you can graph it throughout speed in RAS Arrow, correct?
Yeah, and an open rocket. Racera, I trust more. It's just a better solver, but yeah.
Shout out Chuck Rogers, Mr. Rogers, if you will.
Fun fact: he RSO'd my L3 flight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's there. It's cool. But yeah, again, note that these stability targets, it isn't a hard line. Like, it isn't 12% and you die, and it isn't like I flew rockets Mach 3.6 with 1x like fin span of my 1x by body diameter fin span. Like, it's very much a sliding scale. It's sliding from your guaranteed fine to your guaranteed bad, and then there's like a massive range in there where you might be, you might not be. Ask an aerodynamicist. I'm not one. I like propulsion. I don't know anything about aerodynamics. I just work here.
I like as a little bit of a pitch for the fin span, because for 4-inch rocket, 1.25 is 5 inches. That's out of control. I mean, but
that's a little large.
So I was giving some advice, and I don't know if it's needed to be passed down where it came from or desired to be. I would give credit, but I don't know if I should, is the thing here. But somebody who does very high performance rockets, I found out, builds like the motor and the entire rocket without fins to reference the actual starting center of gravity. And that's how he decides his final fin shape. And I think that's what I'm going to adopt for my N1560, because I'm getting away with as little as I feel comfortable with.
I actually used to do that, and then I got lazy.
You're like, I got good, actually.
But yeah, and at this point, actually, most of the numbers have stopped like being a really big factor in my decisions. With how I set up fins, the CG on these rockets usually ends up being very high because you have motor and propellant that's so high on the rocket, and you end up with really heavy front ends and really thick nose cones. And you're also having large fin spans. If you have shocks that are obscuring your fins, for example, you like having a little bit of an extra fin span to get above that, and to get a little more fin to cut through the air. I'm no aerodynamicist, but a little fin don't hurt anyone. And I have found that most of my rockets end up at like 20% stable. I've flown rockets between like 15 to 25% for most of these high speed rockets, and they kind of just tend to go straight and just kind of work. People will say, "Oh, but my weathercocking." I'm not weathercocking if I'm going 200 feet per second off my pad. So, that's kind of how it ends up going.
Real.
Yeah.
Real.
Most of my rockets I launch out of towers that are 7 to 10 feet tall. I'm going pretty fast off of them. I'm pulling probably 50 to 100 Gs off of most of these towers, and they kind of just go straight. What the government doesn't want you to know is that if your rocket's always weathercocked, just go faster. And yeah.
Yikes, that's a tough one for us long burn minimum diameter people. Speed is scary, Thomas, but you're kind of convincing us otherwise. Also, for those of you just listening, Matthew August Myers from Olathe, Kansas has just joined us.
No, I'm late guy number one. Boosk, I'm sorry to have missed out on your awesome looking presentation here. Can you just go ahead and repeat everything you just said, please?
Yeah. All right. Hold on.
Oh,
Let's
shoot.
go back.
Yeah, run her back.
Oh,
Yeah, right about-
okay.
No,
Okay.
you'll get the notes afterwards, Matt,
Please.
for you to study.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, just watch the
Okay.
podcast.
Oh, there you go.
Oh yeah, I guess you could do that.
Yeah.
What podcast?
Watch the visual version of the CAD post.
Thank you.
All right. These are some other tools I use. I don't only just like build an open rocket and then build a rocket. I usually have an intermediary in the middle where I do individual component design. I do a lot of custom components, custom avionics sleds, custom motor hardware, nose cone molds, stuff like that. And I need some way to do that. And for me, computer aided design, or CAD, as engineer kids would know, is what I use. For my personal projects, I use Autodesk Fusion 360. It's just what's free and it's easy and it's cloud based, and I don't need anything crazy for my CAD. I need it to make simple shapes and kind of just work. And it does that. In professional worlds, we use things like Siemens NX or CATIA or tools like that. Very expensive, very hard to get your hands on. Don't need anything crazy out of your CAD software for rockets like these. You find that most of the stuff you're making is lines and rectangles and circles and a hole in a couple of components, and it's very simple CAD work. A lot of the components are very simple. It is not a regeneratively cooled liquid rocket engine, or what is it, the rotating annular aerospike?
Aerospike, yeah, for Space Train, Space Train. Dude, Space Train's on some big stuff right now. I'm pretty excited to see what they do. But yeah, dude, I need to get more on my 3D design game because Taylor is now beating me.
Oh no.
I feel like if not for the desire to have like apps, Taylor would maybe still have a flip phone. So I'm falling behind.
Yeah, gotta stay on top.
This is the man that built a large piece of basically angle iron, but out of wood to align the rail buttons, which worked. Well, I love the
Anglewood.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think you'll be happy to know that for aligning my rail buttons, I look at my rocket and look that it's straight.
Yeah, that's what I do as well. I like to use the eyes. Although, do you guys want to talk about real quick what happened the second I left when you were building the Arcus?
That's okay.
I stepped away.
We should move on.
To do a land
move
for
on.
1 minute.
You can tell me the
All
story.
right.
I'd like to hear it.
They drilled the rail button way off center on the top one, and then filled the hole and drilled a new one. And then Shane said something about it when Taylor got back home, and Taylor was like, "I thought we weren't gonna tell him."
That's not how that went. I didn't say anything.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure maybe it was the other way around. Yeah. Well.
See, you mentioned drilling, or you've mentioned filling the hole after you drill it in the wrong place. I don't even fill the hole. I just fly it.
Whoa.
Those are memories.
This guy is crazy.
So,
the thing is, it
for
was
the
like
record-
close enough that we needed to try and reuse it, but not quite. So we put a dowel in it.
Wow.
For the record, it was in the right spot. We just weren't being
Yeah.
careful enough with the angle of the drill bit is all.
How many died?
Got it.
I still think it would have been fine.
How many died DDPs were you guys in when you drilled the hole?
The rocket was.
There's no way to say.
Yeah, after all the glassing the tubes and everything, we had to be a couple cases down.
Oh, jeez, that's gross.
Sorry to derail
Yeah.
you again here, Thomas.
Oh, no worry. I derail myself daily.
Nice. I told you this man knows how to party. Sheesh.
That's not what I meant, but sure.
Hey, wait,
Yeah.
Braden, what happens if the space train derails?
I don't know why you're asking me. I don't have any sort of association with that company.
Oh,
Earth,
okay.
Earth escape velocity, you go to the sun.
Ooh.
Oh no.
Oh.
Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. That'll be fine then.
The one time, one of the times I drilled a rail button hole in the wrong spot, because I usually do. I put that was my level 3 flight. I put duct tape on the inside and I flew it. So for anyone that's listening, just put duct tape on the inside. Just works.
Beautiful.
That's nice.
Yeah, some tools, other tools that isn't CAD and isn't part design. I use Open Motor for ballistic simulation. Shout out Andrew Riley, made a great tool for simulating rocket motors when they burn. This is for experimental propellants. ProPep is propellant evaluation software. You can put a formula in there, see what kind of ISP you're expecting out of it, see what kind of temperatures you're getting out of it. I find CFD, computational fluid dynamics tools, to be not very useful for this kind of work. You can get 99.9% of the way there with Brass Arrow for the really, really key metrics. CFD is cool for some things, but if you're just trying to make a rocket work, there's time spent in other places. For things like stresses and trying to see how much stress different components are in, things like MATLAB, Python, Excel are very, very useful. I do a lot of Excel, just spreadsheets. I'm like, oh, I have this thing. I want to see how much stress it's under. I do a little Excel calculator. And now I have a little Excel calculator for random niche load case. Same with MATLAB. I don't use Python a lot. I just learned MATLAB. But if you are good with a coding language, you can also use that too. And yeah.
The amount Matt just got excited to hear MATLAB was hilarious.
I'm
to
more of a Python feller. I've been reading the Pythons, so
I thought you were just excited to hear your own name.
Can we get that on a shirt? I'm more of a Python feller. Macho Matt.
something like that.
Thomas, if I may, real quick, derail once again. I have to admit that I'm a boomer in the world of software once again. And for one very hyper-specific reason, I like Burn Sim.
Because you had it 20 years ago?
No, well, yes, but also because you can use different propellants inside one motor. So if I want to make some...
The hack with that is to sim it as one propellant, but sim it as the spicier propellant. So it can't be worse than that.
All right, fair enough. But if you're listening, Open Motor requests for features, just let me have 2 different propellants in there. Then I'm all in.
So I'm going to aside real quick. I believe that the reason that Burn Sim's 2 propellant simulation is actually kind of not great is because it makes the assumption that the temperature of the gas is going to have some effect on how fast your propellant burns. And if you're burning in, let's say, a nitrogen environment at some pressure, it's going to be 5 or 10% slower than in a hot motor. And I believe, I could be wrong on this, I'm not a ballistician, but I believe that assumes a constant temperature of the gas throughout the motor. So you might actually have a different burn rate on propellant 2 than it would be with the gas temperature of propellant 1. So if you have the top of your motor is propellant 1, the bottom of your motor is propellant 2, the gas from propellant 1 is going over propellant 2, and now propellant 2 is going to behave a little bit differently. So you have to make some assumptions, and it's kind of messy. For actually the Hare rocket motor, we just put 2 propellants in and simmed it as the spicier one, and it's just kind of okay.
Okay, but what if you're looking at... I mean, I understand the issue, but just using the spicier propellant, if you want to do a dual thrust motor type situation, you can't just be okay, we'll just sim the whole thing at warp 9 speed, and then should be fine with this giant nozzle, with the rest of it being just a slow propellant.
Yeah, but I see where you're coming from.
I think the correct answer would be just wing it and see what happens.
I think you could sim it almost as 2 motors. You could see how much for the beginning that would be kind of recursive, but for the rest you could sim it as just the top grains being a motor, and then at the startup you'd have to do some really funky stuff, and it would probably not have a very easy solution. Yeah.
Sorry, again, derailing, but
yeah, I don't know. I'm not a ballistician. I'm not a software engineer. Someone probably has a good answer for this. I'm not
a software engineer.
I'm late guy number 1.
Well, what do you say we talk about some recovery, Thomas? This is an idea
Well, good
I'm
segue.
having on my own.
Yeah, but potentially. So recovery systems are someone's going to say, "Oh, recovery is the most important part of your rocket." The most important part of the rocket is all the rocket because you can't have some of the rocket. You have to have kind of all the rocket. But in terms of what you really, really care about working, regardless of the rest, recovery is decently high up on there. The recovery architectures that we use are almost exclusively single separation, dual deploy. If you have a main bay and a drogue bay, you're probably missing out on some optimization. You have extra shock cord, extra attachment points, more eye bolts, whatnot. So if you can shrink it all, that's nice. Cable cutters, a lot of people will be familiar with them, or maybe have flown them. They're decently light, decently simple, but as a certain Braden Carlson once found out, they're not infallible. As a certain me also once found out, they're also not infallible. They work great
Repeatedly,
sometimes.
I might add. I found out repeatedly.
Yeah. They tangle sometimes. They early deploy sometimes. Skill based on one hand, but not the most inherently reliable system.
How
Of course,
could it
you
have
can
been
get
my fault? What do you mean?
I don't know.
Sorry, go on. I just, I'm a little offended. Is all.
Yeah, be
Just-
better, Braden.
Yeah.
It says the guy who just his worked at NSL because it exploded. It didn't cut. Well, it did
It's
cut the
reliable. It reliably explodes, and that cuts the cable.
cable. Man just built a firecracker with a zip tie running through it.
You're just
I mean-
jealous.
Well, the requirement was that it cut the zip tie and held it closed.
And it did.
Yeah, I guess it's a
It
good
just
point.
exploded.
Fair enough.
The other things that the other type that has become a favorite of ours was a shoot cannon. This is where, say you have a drogue bay. Inside of your drogue bay, or as a part of your drogue bay, you have a spot for the main parachute in. On some rockets, this is just a section of the drogue bay. It's one continuous bay, but the main is held in on, like, let's say on the nose cone side. On an example that I have here for the audio watchers, I'm sorry, and for the visual listeners, here you go. There is a can that looks like literally a DEP can that is inside of the nose cone that houses the main parachute itself. As a cap on it, so it retains the main parachute. It has an ejection charge in there for the main parachute. And then that is all like Russian nesting dolled inside of the drogue compartment for the recovery. So I've not personally flown it. I came up with this design for a rocket that didn't make it to this phase of flight. And then some friends have flown it on a 4-inch rocket that worked good. This is very similar to the one on the screen right now. And then some friends flew it on a 5-inch rocket that also recovered well. They reported very, very little tangling, just a very simple recovery system to put together. But we haven't flown it to, whatever, many million thousand feet. So I can't give a review on that.
And in this diagram, are the two tubes running through that compartment? Are those the like apogee or charge cannons?
Yep.
Yeah.
So for the audio watchers, there's 2 1/4-inch aluminum tubes that go through the main recovery compartment, and those are filled with BP and dog barf and E-matches, and those are the actual black powder charges.
They're full of E-matches. There's like 13 in there.
Yeah, you can fit in one of those maybe 2 E-matches.
But yeah, it just if you're familiar with the idea of a charge cannon, it's just that, but really long enough to run through the shoot cannon. We've made it 50 minutes before really leaning into something that kind of relied on you seeing it. I think that's pretty good.
It's like a straw.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you really need to know, Anti-Gravity Group on YouTube, you can check it out there. Sorry, everybody.
The last and potentially my favorite recovery method is pop at the top, single deploy, man at apogee. Just send it. Walk further. This is a little facetious. very low mass, very reliable. It kind of just works. I am guilty of doing it sometimes. Requires tame winds. Don't fly it if you're going high and you don't know what your winds are. Make sure you're not breaking your waiver. Make sure you're not putting a rocket in China Lake. Make sure that you're obeying laws, not getting yourself banned, and not doing anything irresponsible. But if you're at BlackRock and you have like a 12-mile waiver or something, and you just pop at the top and it's not that windy of a day, and you land 5 miles away and you drive to it on the playa, is life really that bad?
Dude, Shane's main came out at 32,000 and it landed a mile away.
Yeah.
He got
It
the
was
golden
sick.
ticket at BlackRock.
Wow.
If you're doing it on a mountainous site like Far, I did this once, then had to climb a mountain. So,
Interesting. I also did that once and had to climb a mountain, but it was at BlackRock. I just missed one of the largest lake beds in the country, but it's fine.
you see, Braden, if you like look at the lake bed, it's like as wide as California.
It really is, yeah. And yet here we are. I hiked 4.5 miles up a mountain to get my rocket back. Another shout out, of course, to Eric Beavers, because if I didn't have somebody with me on that hike, I might have died. I don't know why, but I just was like really feeling it with like, we had like this whole Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure thing going. I was really motivated. If it was just me, I would have been like, you know what? I don't think I want any of that stuff back. I'm never going to find that thing.
Yeah, it'd be like that. All right. Avionics is, I don't know, it's one of the harder parts of building these is packaging all the avionics in a pretty small space, especially if you're doing like a 54 or 38 millimeter diameter rocket. It generally is either on top of the motor, literally bolted to the motor, or to the tip of your nose cone. On top of the motor, I've done it before, and it's suitable for when you're not doing RF opaque materials for a nose cone coupler. For example, if you have a fiberglass coupler and you can get radios through, that's great. If you're using carbon fiber coupler and you can't get your radios through your coupler, that's a bit of an issue. Now you have to have more bays for antennas and stuff like that, and it just gets a little annoying pretty quickly. And it's great when your components can fit around a threaded rod. If you have a threaded rod going into your motor and you can fit all of your components around it like a donut, it's great. Life is good. It's also nice if you have a recovery attachment point in the center, like if you have a tapped motor and you can put recovery on there and then put all your stuff around your recovery. That's great. And the other perk is that it allows you to have a camera on a straight section of a nose cone without having an absurdly long avionics bay. You don't have to have it on a slant or anything like that. And it's just very nice for camera's sake. I end up doing in the nose tip the vast majority of the time. It means that you can use RF opaque nose cone couplers like aluminum, carbon fiber, what have you. And it also means that you can easily use the sled as a structural component. I've been doing sleds where the recovery loading goes through the fiberglass sled itself, not through a threaded rod, which cuts down on weight, cuts down on thickness, makes it a little easier to model. And then it's also nice if you can use magnetic switches for this. That means you don't have to have screw switches going to the slant. But I also have done that, and it does kind of just work. And yeah, these are some examples. Again, this is going to be for the visual listeners mostly, but as a TLDR on top of the motor, this was an L1000. It used the motor as a nose cone coupler, and it had a threaded rod going through the middle for the recovery. And had an Easy Mini in there, GPS, screw switch, batteries, and they all kind of fit in a nice little donut around the threaded rod. On the right side, there is an avionics bay for an L2100. It has a central avionics sled. It has an adapter at the front that bolts to the sled and adapts to a length of thread, like a threaded stud that you can screw a nose tip into. And then at the back, it has a bulkhead to block ejection gases and whatnot from coming up. And this was an Easy Mini and a featherweight GPS, and some batteries in there, and also just kind of worked. In this setup, the sled is actually your nose tip attachment and also your recovery attachment. So it's all just going through this one central thing that ends up simplifying your entire system. Now, like your recovery attachment and your nose cone attachment and your entire avionics bay is like, it's a thing that you can just like pick up and like hold in like 2 fingers. And it makes for something that's very light, simple, easy to go together. Yeah. If you look very carefully and I'm not saying I'm a perfect human, but I did hot glue and duct tape some batteries on, and it did survive 100 Gs. Actually, about 150 Gs. So,
If there's not
Yeah.
components taped in your electronics bay, you're doing something wrong. I'll say it.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to say it.
and
I'm not sure if I've ever mounted a battery.
Oh,
Yeah.
I do want to quickly touch on this because there's still a lot of people under the impression that having vent holes in a nose cone because of the shape of the nose cone causes false readings with the electronics and will not work. But if this is the first time you're seeing this kind of thing, this phenomenon, Thomas's rockets and everybody else doing crazy submin stuff at FAR was like my breakthrough point to realizing that that was bull-ish, as we might call it on the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. But yeah, it's I think people operate sort of under the assumption that like the hole's there for like air to rush through and not just for pressure equalization, which is all it really is. So one of these rockets, Thomas, didn't you just the hole for your switch was that's it and that's all it had?
Yeah, it was a single 1/8-inch hole through the side of the nose cone doing Mach 3.5. And I looked at the barometric readings because I thought that was going to be an issue too, but I forgot who convinced me, but someone convinced me it wasn't going to be an issue. And I looked, and I could have sworn it was from any of my other rockets. I'm sure there's going to be some edge case somewhere where it doesn't work and where you have issues. And I'm not going to say it's better than just having a normal vent hole like a normal human being. But I will say that as far as we've seen in our high performance stuff at FAR, it hasn't been an issue yet.
Well, and I mean,
no warranty.
There's a case for that being better in terms of the amount of structure you're taking away from a nose cone that's going nearly hypersonic in a lot of cases, right? Well, I won't say a lot of cases, but like if you have a rotating annular set of holes around the nose cone, you're effectively creating a line like straight through where those holes are drilled that's substantially weakened compared to the rest of the composite, right? So if you can get away with one hole, or I guess just staggering them might help as well. Ultimately, though, taking away less material is less bad. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah.
I'll let Thomas take back over.
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that more holes in different locations, staggered with smaller hole sizes, is nice for just like better barrel readings. But you know, I've done some pretty heinous things, and I've yet to get bit for it. I will say, not that I won't ever get bit for it, but I have yet to get bit for it.
That's all that matters.
So, yeah, one of these days I'll learn how to drill a vent hole. This is a little bit of a deeper dive into the nose tip avionics bay. I have a little screenshot of some of the design work here, but the gist is that it has a central sled. It's made out of fiberglass. It means I don't have a threaded rod in there, which might attenuate my radios. This is all inside of like a 0.1 inch thick nose cone. So if it goes sideways, it's almost like a black box. Like the nose cone, it's going to fail at the base of the nose cone, not the tip, in most cases. So I have something that's like a brick where it can survive going sideways. It can survive, like, say you're doing Mach 3.6 at a black rock desert and your rocket just bananas, and you have a nose cone fall off your rocket, and you just like go sideways. Not that this would happen to me or anyone else,
Right.
but say it does happen. You get your avionics back still because your nose cone's in one piece, and it just like kind of just like falls back down to the earth. Most avionics is pretty durable, but that relies on it not being split in half. So if you can avoid that by having a black box, that's great. I say recovery attachment hole on this presentation because that it's a hole in the sled that the Kevlar is tied into. There's no eye bolt anywhere on this rocket, and that it's a hole. Can't get much simpler than that. Can't get much easier than that. And now you don't have to have space for an eye bolt or pack anything around the eye bolt. It has a little coupler. I don't know what exactly to call it, but I call it a nose tip attachment coupler, where it could bolt to the sled and transmit the load of the shock cord, and then thread into the tip. And yeah, these components were all machined out of aluminum, and the sled itself, of course, is fiberglass. Fin construction is a very hot topic on this kind of thing. You know, how do you make it good? How do you make it strong, cheap, lightweight? How do you make it aerodynamically optimal? Like, what do you do? This is one example of what you can do. The design credit for this goes to Julien Donat, the Frenchman who came to the US and taught us all how to make rockets for about a semester. Absolute force of nature. And this is a fin can that he designed, and he had an extra one, so I bought it off of him and flew it. But it was single piece 3D printed out of an aluminum alloy that is optimized for 3D printing. And this single piece 3D printing means that you are outside of the normal constraints of, say, your machining fins. You can have ribs on the inside. You can have it hollow. You can do root to tip tapers. You can do, ribs on the inside. I probably already said that. You can do tail cones as a single piece with your fin can. You can kind of do anything as long as you're good enough with a computer to be able to do it. You don't have to have a 5-axis mill. You don't have to be great with composites. You need to have good enough computer skills, and whatever you can design, you can pretty much make, with some limitations, of course. You need to be able to get the powder out. All the features need to be supported. You need to make sure you're not, having anything that's going to warp or anything that's too thin. But insofar as you understand the constraints of the manufacturing technique and you can design it, you can build it in a very, very cool way. This often requires some post-processing. The surface finish feels kind of like sandpaper out of the box, and that's not great. So I went to town on it for maybe 30 minutes to, get it a little smoother. Yeah.
What did you use to smooth it out? Like sandpaper or?
Yeah,
Okay.
straight up sandpaper. I was. I'm sure there's a better way.
Yeah.
I'm a worse human though. So
Oh,
You didn't use the concrete outside or anything like that? No, that makes sense.
use a wire wheel.
I couldn't find a wire wheel, so I didn't use one.
That is a good point.
Composites. We mentioned this very shortly earlier, but a method with lots of efficacy on doing this kind of thing is to cut a piece of carbon fiber out of a plate, bevel it on a belt sander or hand sander or whatever, bond it to your motor casing with some big fillets, and just kind of send it. Worth noting, absolutely most important thing is bond prep. Make sure that you are doing excellent bond prep. I do wipe with acetone, then IPA to clean all the surfaces, and then all this is within an hour of bonding. I don't let this sit for a day or whatever. I will tack my fins on. I will do the cleaning. I will scuff it up with about 220 grit sandpaper. I will clean it again with acetone and again with IPA, and then do my fillet all within an hour to make sure that my bond is as good as I can get it. I've flown this to Mach 3.5 or so, and I'm sure it's been flown faster this way. This isn't optimal. You have a massive fillet. It's kind of heavy. It's not aerodynamically optimal. You don't have any tapers. You can't do a crazy airfoil, but it's cheap and it's easy, and it kind of just works when the requirement is to make it go fast. You can absolutely get more ham on this. Kurt Von Delius did a great tip-to-tip layup where he had basically zero fillet on his fin, and he was doing a bunch of layers of pre-preg tip-to-tip, and then also having them grow as you got further out. So you could have a root to tip taper and kind of also a wedge shape in your composite. Extremely skilled composites worker. I am not that. I am as good as I need to be and no better.
That's right. Woo!
When it comes to composites. Yeah. Leading edge protection is a question I get asked a lot. How do you make sure that your leading edges don't fray? It's in the about Mach 3 to 3.5 range. It gets pretty necessary. I've been doing just an epoxy coating on the leading edge with like a high temp structural epoxy. We flew that Mach 3.5 on an N3000 or something like that, and it looked as good as new. And a very common one, Kip popularized this, was to have like a bent stainless steel cap over your fin that kind of takes the heat. And for doing something really crazy, like USC Rocket Propulsion Lab was, they had an entire like block of titanium, I believe, something like that, that got machined down and sort of put over their fins, and that became a very popular approach.
Whoa.
I shouldn't say very popular, but a known approach for making fins that can do like Mach 5, Mach 6, and just kind of survive.
And look really cool
Jeez.
too. Looks like a knife
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah, they're about as sharp
Wow.
as one. These, you can make it a fin can for reusability. I don't, because I'm lazy and I'm really bad and I really like my Mach numbers. But if you want a reusable fin can, you absolutely can do that. There's nothing stopping you. And if you're using a molding techniques, if you're using tip to tip, and you are good with it, and if you are using like core materials or anything like else like that, you can get lighter fins that perform better. And really, composites are a very, very skill-based thing. It's very, like I mentioned, the 80-20 rule. It is very easy to get a good enough product and very hard to go to 100% product. And when it comes to like 80-20, I'm at like 70% to the 80%. And Kurt and Julian, they're at like 99.9%. So, yeah. There are some motor hardware modifications that we've been doing more and more. And this all spawned from, we want to go faster and we don't want smoke grains in our motors. We don't want, big bulky bulkheads that, we don't need. Tracking smoke does nothing for us because we can't even see the rocket if we tried. And we want something that is going to give us a little bit more performance. So the RCS, Rock Motor Components, they make a thing called this experimental motor kit, which is basically all the things that you need to make an experimental motor, all the hardware, nozzles, liners, stuff like that, and then you just need to supply propellant. They also happen to sell propellant, so you can build the entire thing, but instead of buying a commercial motor, you take out the parts you don't want, you put the parts you do want in, you make your own propellant geometry, you can get spicier, and I was able to make a L2100 or so using all commercial off-the-shelf parts and propellant with, I don't know, a couple hours of work, a little bit of design work, and it kind of just worked.
I will note too, RCS now is selling, I think it's just in 75 at the moment, but they have like smoke delete forward closures that for 75 millimeter rotors, so you can save that little bit of space. A little bit goes a long way.
Yep. I said I have this space in my rocket that's a smoke grain. Why can't I turn it into recovery volume? So on something like I have on the photo, it has a bonded forward closure where it is a plate of a forward closure, and then it has space for epoxy where it glues into the motor casing to bond it in. It's retained by the epoxy. And then it has a nose cone coupler all in the same component. This was CNC machined in China for far too little money, but I've also done this where the coupler and the bulkhead are different parts, so you can actually machine it on like a hand lathe. So yeah, this is by far not the most designed for manufacturing optimized design ever, but it kind of worked, and I wasn't forcing a poor guy in Tahoe to machine it like the other one. So we can get away with some things. Another fun thing are expansion cones and tail cones. A lot of the time, very high thrust motors are not properly expanded, so you aren't getting the full performance that you could be getting. So you can expand and add more expansion ratio using an aluminum expansion cone. And then it's also nice to be able to have a little bit less base drag, so you can have a tail cone. And then you can put those both in one part and then have a combination. And the way I came to the how much tail cone, how much expansion cone was mostly through just a couple of trial and error with brass arrow, having a little bit more expansion, having a little less expansion, seeing about where the local altitude maximum was, and then kind of picking a point around there. It's not a very sensitive thing. Like you can go a little bit above, a little bit below, and you're going to be within the noise. But it's a thing you can tweak. this is a little bit more about how we did the quasi-experimental motors. And for the RCS and Aerotech propellants, you're pretty much limited to what you can make using a drill or a knife. You're not casting your own propellant, so you can't make like a conical grain or a finicil with very much ease. So everything here was just drilled straight cores. And yeah, it's possible to configure higher performing motors than you could buy. I like Propellant X. I like hard burning motors. And the about spiciest Aerotech motor you can buy is an L1000. This was an L2100 in the same size case with about the same amount of propellant. A little bit more impulse and very similar otherwise to put together. For the design software, I use OpenMotor. It's great for grain geometry. It requires propellant parameters like your A and N values, your thermodynamic properties, but all that's available on datasheets from RCS. And just using data from RCS, and if you have a case and you have the propellant, there's very little stopping you from making a quote-unquote experimental motor. If you are doing this for the first time, I would very highly recommend you work with someone that has done it or designed motors before to get an idea of, good operating regions and sort of optimize it safely. It's not something that is entirely intuitive or that you're just going to come to the best solution on first principles. So working with people that have done it, absolutely recommend. I had some folks that were mentoring me, helping me get to a good, safe product, and it was good. On the bottom right, I have the nice little honorary mention. Made a 38-240 2-grain warp 9 motor. I put nose cones on them, and those were H500s. So you can go pretty spicy with some pretty tiny motors. For nose cone couplers, you can do conical couplers or straight couplers. By conical, I mean that the actual interface isn't a straight shoulder like you have on a regular nose cone. You're actually coupling to the cone portion. There are some issues. For example, it can suffer from a taper lock. You can look up Morse taper. It's that phenomenon. But that's avoidable by cutting a relief in the middle, so it's only engaged at the very bottom of the coupler and at the very top of the coupler. Another thing is that this requires a very precise control of your taper angle. In this kind of thing, I'm designing for 3.5 degrees, and I want 3.5. I don't want 3.6. I don't want 3.4. So it's very beneficial to be done like on a CNC lathe or equipment like that. And yeah, it's not something that you'd really, really want to machine as like a beginner machinist project on a manual lathe. But I know people that have done it, so it's doable. But don't. But it's probably going to take a little bit more work. Yeah. A straight coupler. Most of y'all already familiar with this. It's literally it's what it sounds like. It's good for Von Karman or ogive nose cones. How do you say it?
I don't know. I say Augive, and that's been
Oh no.
OG from OG.
I've always gone Ogive.
Okay.
Is Ogive, I believe.
Oshife.
Sounds about right.
There
All
we
right.
go. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's like
if you're using
when we went to LDRS, we were staying in Fueno in California.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using a VK nose cone or an Oshife type nose cone, that's great. You don't have a cone to couple to, so you can just kind of put it on the straight section like you'd normally have. This is easier to machine manually. The parts on the right, those are all manually machined parts. For the people on audio, you're not missing a ton here. It's components that look like they were lathes because they were, and they exist. So, yeah. Outsource manufacturing suppliers. I'm not a great machinist. I don't have a lot of access to machine tools. I kind of live and I get most of the stuff that I do outsourced. And this is kind of a new genre of ways to get things machined. In the past, you would find your local neighborhood machinist, go to them, be like, "Hey, John, I need a graphite nozzle. Can you machine some graphite for me?" And then mail it to me. And then you just kind of do it. And then nowadays, there's a couple of services, one called Send Cut Send, that's very, very popular in the US. And then a couple, especially JLC PCB, that are popular overseas. Of course, China, very controversial manufacturing, but they I will not lie, make just as good parts as you can get anywhere in the US for a lot cheaper.
Plus, John's
it
kind of
is-
finicky. I've worked with
Yeah.
that guy before, you know?
Yeah. I don't know who your John is, but mine was fine.
Oh, good. Different
Yeah,
Johns then.
if you have tariffs, if they decide to have tariffs at the time you try to buy components, bad luck. Okay. If you
Whoa, this isn't a political podcast, Thomas. Come on.
if you don't have tariffs at the time, great for you.
No, take your ideology out of here.
Oh, sorry, I need to go back to where I came from.
Oh,
Cal-
that's not what I was saying. I want to specify that is not what I was saying. That's his words, not mine.
I need to specify I'm from California, so I just go back to where you are.
Okay, yeah, good point. Good point.
So yeah, the business model is you upload a CAD file, you pick your material, you pick anything else like any countersinking you want done or any specific tolerances you have, you buy it and you just get components. Yeah,
Pretty sick. It's
Yeah.
pretty sick. Like,
it's pretty crazy. Senka-sen, they got famous for doing flat sheet metal components, both cutting and bending. So if you could make it out of sheet metal, you're in luck. They now do some composite materials as well and some plastics. So I get G10 stuff from there. And actually, they're doing a trial right now where they're doing CNC machining services where they have up to 5-axis machining. They're not quite at JLC prices from what I've heard, but they are very, very high quality and domestic, and I'll probably be using their services for as much as I can. Great company owned by great people that are pushing out consistently very, very good products and amazing customer service. I would be ordering something and like 2 days later it's shipped out, and they're based in Reno and I'm in Phoenix, and then like 2 days later it's in my house. It's kind of nuts.
yeah, and they also, for people who are just watching or listening, but aren't quite ready for the world of big or high performance stuff, or maybe you want to build big giant rockets, those are fun too. They do wood as well, so you can do like crazy cluster centering rings and stuff, and just like send them a CAD file, and then you don't have to have your local John or Taylor cut them for you.
Yep. Yeah, they even do some really funny ones, like they machine phenolic. So if you want to like get blanks for like a phenolic nozzle or something like that, I guess you could do that. Or if you wanted to like make a insulator for the top of a motor, you could do that on Send.
Or like a nozzle carrier. You have a spot for a graphite insert or something.
Yeah, that's you'll be able to do that more so with machining. Hopefully, the next few months, we're
Right.
able to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about Senka-Send. Awesome company. Glad they exist. They're really, really pushing domestic manufacturing, sort of harder than anyone's really tried to push it in terms of cost and in terms of, really, really owning the entire process. So yeah, love them. JLC PCB, they've been doing most of the turning and 5-axis milling for a lot of random parts. For example, if I need a random circular component or like a bulkhead or something like that, they could do it pretty easily, especially out of aluminum. But your mileage may vary on. They're going to take a little longer being overseas. And of course, you don't know exactly where your money's going. You don't know the guy that owns the company because he tweeted you. And yeah, so
it's a good point.
Yeah, these are some examples of components. I got a little like closure bulkhead thingamabob from JLC PCB and a nose tip. Very simple components. I got this carbon fiber fin from Senka-Send, and then I beveled it on a belt sander just on vibes. And then on the bottom right, there's a little haul, but it's some steel components for a tower from Senka-Send, some other flat components, some machine stuff from JLC. And yeah, it's just generally a very nice way if you're limited on time like me, or if you're limited on availability machines. Like I'm guessing of many, many people watching, and especially those in amateur rocketry, you don't just have a machine shop in your garage, so you have to find other ways. And they exist. These are some easy composites methods. There are a couple of ways to make nice-ish composite parts for very, very little effort. One is to take a carbon fiber or fiberglass sleeve, We get it from Solar Composites. There are a couple of other manufacturers, but they have great customer service, awesome people as well. Super helpful if you just like call them up and you ask, for what you need. And the epoxy, it's pretty much your choice. I use US Composite 635, and then if I need some temp resistance or a little more performance, I use Air Epoxy. You get some sort of a mandrel or a mold. If it's a motor case, you use a liner. If it's a body tube, you use a coupler. If it's a nose cone, you 3D print a mold. And then for mold release, you can use Mylar, or you can use straight up condoms. If it's a round object, condoms work way better than they, probably intuitively should. But, it just kind of works. The epoxy application, you don't need to do anything crazy for it. You don't need to have any crazy application methods. You just kind of pour it on and you squeeze it. You have a composite part in about a day. Then you cut it, post-process it, sand it, do whatever you want. These are some parts on totally opposite sides of the spectrum. On the left side is a little chute cannon for a tiny parachute. On the right side is a motor case that took 1500 psi of Loki M1378. Both using like $2 a foot solar composite sleeves. So, all right.
Wow, that almost sounded like a vacuum cleaner or something, Braden.
Like traffic.
Yeah. There are some examples for nose cone manufacturing. This is probably the most common use of solar sleeves. But the most common is a 3D print a mold, put some sleeves over it, have some sort of release, demold it, sand it, trim it, fly it. The rocket on the top left, great photo by Matt, but that's a L1000 to Mach 3-ish. I don't know, I put an easy mini in there, so it won't tell me. All this can be sort of put together into a very simple rocket. And I had a little bit of a design example of a rocket I built that I've alluded to a couple of times in here. That was very simple. It was probably, 20 hours of build time that I did for, a couple hours a day, kind of a when I had time thing, and flew it out far. Kind of just worked. And I figured that this is a good example of very simple techniques that all just went together and pretty seamlessly. So it was about 21,000 feet, Mach 3.6. Excel was somewhere 120 to 150 Gs. Didn't have an accelerometer, so we can't say for sure. The motor, it was a Propellant X L2100, 7 grains, all cylindrical cores, all faces bonded for motor nerds, about 1,000 PSI motor, running a little hotter than RCS recommends, but we do that over here. It's about 2,600 Newton seconds, so about that of an L1000, but burning in half the time. So yeah, spicy motor, sends. The fin can is that 3D printed aluminum fin can that Julian designed. The nose cone is 6 plies of solar fiberglass sleeves. The Avionics sled is the fiberglass sled that I mentioned earlier. The nose tip and the coupler, that's all aluminum from JLC. And yeah, if you're an audio watcher, sorry, but the photo on the right is a nice photo by other Julian Rice. Great rocket builder in his own respect. For the audio watchers, it made about a 1.5 flame to rocket ratio.
It's really cool.
Pretty good ratios.
On the fin can with the 3D printed, the aluminum one, how was it retained on the motor? I missed that part.
I glued it.
That's awesome.
Oh my God. Julian is he cares more about his things than I do. And he actually had holes in the fin can for small carbon fiber pins to go through, or metal pins, or whatever he chose. So you could have it pinned in and then drill the pin out or pull the pin out and get it out. I glued it.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds a lot better, Braden. Thanks.
So
yeah.
Cool.
You can do kind of what you want. This is the Avionics from Recovery. I mentioned this earlier. This is all parts we've seen. 18-inch parachute with about a 35 feet per second landing. It's at the Tripoli. It's about the peak of the Tripoli recommended landing speed, but rockets that are overbuilt for Mach 3, Mach 4 usually have no issues with a sporty landing. It's not like a one-cert rocket built out of like paper. this is a rocket where I'm pretty sure I could chuck like a javelin and it'd be fine. So
Well, it also says in the AAA rules, unless there's prior BOD approval given to exceed that recovery rate. That's all I'm going to say about that, but it does say that in the rules.
all I'm gonna say is that if you have to get more approvals to launch your rocket than you absolutely need to, I feel like it's a waste of time.
Whoa.
Ooh.
That's my take.
Itchy.
That's my take. My take is that I'm going to spend the minimum amount of time on getting approvals that I can. Of course, if it's a waiver or something like that, of course, go for it.
Backtracking a little bit there.
If
I don't
you have
even
to
look
get
for
approval,
airplanes before I launch it. No reason.
if you have to get an approval to launch your rocket and get it back, put a bigger chute in it. It's not that hard. The shock cord, 1,500 pounds from Wildman, nothing crazy. It was actually potted into the annulus of epoxy that holds the forward closure on. So, yeah, no eye bolt in there either. There's a spot for an eye bolt that I didn't use. But yeah, it's literally glued into the motor. Of course, that's going to weaken the epoxy or weaken the shock cord a little bit at that joint. But then my answer to that was just to make it bigger. So,
Woo!
Yeah. The forward closure and coupler, that's all lathed out of 6061 aluminum. Had a conical coupler interface for the nose cone. This one is a great fit. Like I could literally stand on the nose cone, push together, do whatever I want, and then it just perfectly just comes apart. No issue at all. So didn't have any like taper lock issues there. Yep. Here's some build photos. Sorry for the audio watchers. But on the left, there's a fin can that was aluminum. Then I painted pink. On the middle top is an example of a tangled cable cutter. On the right is a photo taken moments before a roll of blue tape hits the camera. On the bottom, there's some integration photos. And yeah, I don't know. It's a rocket. You can imagine it.
Wow. What was the inspiration for the name Deja Vu?
So Julian, I mentioned, is a second fin can. He made one that this rocket was actually, I should have mentioned this earlier, very based off of. I did a lot of like component changes, like changing manufacturing methods and optimizing avionics and stuff like that. But the idea was pretty much his. He called it gas, gas, gas. So,
Matt, do you understand that reference?
Wait, no, sorry, I muted myself. No, I don't, but that sounds cool. Gas. I mean, it sounds like
It's
all gas.
Initial D.
Huh?
Initial D.
Oh.
Fake car
Yes,
guy.
okay.
This man owns an STI.
Yeah, okay. I
Oh
haven't
my
heard
God.
Initial D in a long time.
unbelievable.
A sick black
Oh,
STI.
yeah, gas, gas, gas. I got it.
Oh, see, you got there.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
The story went, we had a friend, Amrith. I went, what do I call the rocket? And he said, you know what you have to do. So
Cool.
then I did it. These are some optimizations that you could make. Composite motor cases are the big one that I've been chasing. I want to be able to make a motor case that is, instead of like a 50% propellant mass fraction of the motor, like a 75% propellant mass fraction. If I can cut the dry weight of the motor by like even 30 or 40%, that's huge gains. I go from like a Mach 3.5 rocket to like a Mach 5.5 rocket. Of course, this is skill based. There's a lot of risk in here. You can have motor overpressures. You can have bad composites. You can, screw up a layup and now you don't have a working motor anymore. And it's kind of hard to verify that your case is good enough without some, much more advanced techniques. So it's a lot of perfection, a lot of trying and getting the process down well, so you can have some like personal confidence in your process. This has been a little bit goofy for me. I had one that failed, one where the COPV worked and the rocket didn't, one where the COPV composite overwrapped a pressure vessel, where that failed because the liner had a crack in it and I knew where the crack was and I labeled the crack and it burned throughout the crack. The crack was because I dropped the propellant grain. It's like that. And the propellant was cast into the liner, so I couldn't really do anything about it. And then one on the right, the one Mach 3.3, that was experimental APCP. That's actually the first time I flew like my APCP formula. Also the first time I successfully flew a COPV. And then that was also the rocket where it popped at the top and landed on a mountain. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Dang.
And then what was I gonna say? Motors, right. There are a couple of optimizations you can do on the propellant front. You're limited, of course, if you're using manufactured propellant on your geometries. You can't like cast a geometry like you can when you're doing experimental motors. Experimental APCP, most commercial propellants are not made for performance and efficiency. They're mostly made for like effects, or like you have a lot of smoke, or you have sparkies, or you have red motors, which is great. And I love red motors not more than anyone, as much as anyone. But if you want performance, it's often much easier to chase that on experimental propellants. And this is kind of a misconception about high performance motors. A lot of people think that high performance is some crazy hack or something, or to get good ISP, specific impulse, you need some crazy formula. But in the end, a lot of it comes down to having a high solids loading. So if you can do like bimodal AP distributions to get that, having high metals in your propellant, like 10+%. And then the formulas to accomplish it are actually very, very simple. My formula that gets 230, 240 seconds of ISP, very, very simple, and didn't take a ton of tuning to get down. Of course, if you're doing experimental for the first time, work with a mentor. I'm not going to say the whole spiel again, but yeah. And then higher performance composites, of course, this is always room for improvement. If you can have higher stiffness or strength materials, if you can have higher temperature resistance, if you can have more optimized shapes and layups and fiber orientations, there's a lot of optimizations to be had there. On the right, I have another flight. This was a Mach 5.2 attempt of a carbon fiber casing Loki M1378. This is a rocket that met a very bitter end 2 seconds after it started, and snapped in half and came down a couple hundred feet from the pad. The COPV, which was what I thought was going to fail, worked, and then the rest of the rocket, which I didn't think was going to have the chance to fail, failed. So, yeah. These are some examples, some photos of some of the builds. On the left, this is a rocket that me and a friend actually built in 2 days. We started Thursday night. We launched it on Saturday. It was a good meme. On the right is a carbon fiber case. That's the carbon case Loki M1378 build, which I'm not getting exact redemption. I'm not building exact same rocket over again, but I'm trying to do something along those same lines with experimental propellant soon. And you can see this is a fun photo of the amount of the diameter of the rocket that is propellant. You have the propellant, then you about 90 thousandths of an inch later, you have your fins. So like it's almost all propellant by volume. The motor is, that is, and fins. And then, yeah, on the left, I did a lot of custom composites. I vowed to not have my fins flutter and to be able to make better plate than I could buy for about half the cost. And I was able to do that using some pretty rudimentary composite techniques. And then these motor cases are getting a little bit experimental. The one on the left, it was 2 plies of medium carbon fiber sleeve from Solar Composites. And then the last layer on top was a layer of 6K intermediate modulus 12 weave that gave it some axial fiber to help resist bending loads. And yeah, so those are some nice things to optimize on, some things that you can push a little further than the generic, I just want to go Mach 3, which is what I've been doing for a decent while now. Some future goals, of course, speed, Mach 5. I want to be able to say I sent something hypersonic. It's kind of a really funny meme. It's, yeah, mostly just a really, really funny meme to say I did Mach 5. I'm still a student in college. If I can say I built the fastest student-built rocket, that'd be kind of funny. If I can say, a rocket of mine went as fast as an X-15, that would be kind of funny.
That's a good point.
That one's very, very far out there, but not totally out of the realm. My main goal none of this on the left for the audio watchers. It's a motor exploding. On the right is a motor working and a rocket going upwards, and it says,
Whoa.
quote, all of this. So if I can do all of that, that would be good. I have too many things to do in the near future, but at some point I need to get back into staging. I had a short staging stint about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And if I can get back into that, that'd be a fun time. One thing that I'm working on as a precursor to that is some single stage 3-inch attempts. If you really, really optimize the snot out of a 3-inch rocket, you get to about 100,000 feet, and it's like Mach 5.5. So, if I can get into those numbers, that'd be a fun time. Upscaling, if I am doing those flights, of course I need some recovery testing time. 100,000 is not trivial to recover from. And then I need to upscale motors, which of course gets more expensive. And I'm a college student that only has so much money and spent about all of it on AP. So, there's not a ton left to be said there about, larger motors are expensive.
When you're talking about staging, are you talking about like staging sub minimum diameter motors or rockets, or are you talking just?
Oh yeah!
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. So some context. The first and to this day only staged flight that I was involved in was a team that I started, and we did a minimum diameter M to L 2-stage because, like some other people on this podcast, we thought that was a great idea.
Good starting point.
Yeah, it's good subscale for my orbital rocket, and they it was a fun project, great project, learned a lot. And if I were to do another 2-stage, I would first, of course, want to go back and just get really reliable staging down. It's like relearning. It's like moving from riding a bicycle to like riding a motorbike. You don't go like 500,000 miles an hour down the cliff like you would on a mountain bike on your motorbike. And I went like 100,000 miles an hour down the cliff when I tried riding the motorbike and crashed.
That's really fast.
So yeah, it's like escape velocity. And if I can get that down, then I'd like to, start staging these like composite case submarine rockets on top of each other. And then if you can do that, once you're at the like Mach 5 range, the gains that you get from staging become like bonkers. If you can do like Mach 5 without drag, then now you can do like Mach 6. And if you can do Mach 6 and then you don't have drag, you can sustain that Mach 6. And it also means that you have to have like crazy thermal protection systems and have like a very, very straight and perfect everything. And of course, I'm not the level of a Rocketeer like the Meraki guys or Kip or anything like that. But if you're getting to that point, it becomes simultaneously a lot harder and also potentially a lot more rewarding. So one day when I have more money to blow and more time. And then last thing, this is a propulsion nerd moment, but if I can get to like 77% propellant mass fraction motors, that'd be great. Right now my standard is about 73. All the motors I've been doing were between about 71 and 73. So if I can get to like 77, there are some potentially very large gains for like vehicle performance in there. That's a lot of component optimizations, but it's work to do. And reliable carbon fiber casings. I want to know that if I just make it, it'll work. And I'm not quite there. I'm getting there, but I want to be there. Yeah, that's hopefully what you guys will see me doing out at FAR and out at balls and for probably the next like 30 years of my life as I to try to get a rocket that goes high.
What if you just do it like a couple months from now and what happens then? You're like, oh, well, okay.
He quits.
Yeah, like first try.
No way. Bigger goals. Bigger goals.
I think that there's probably a stage where this isn't true, but for the most part, every time you finish a project, you're completely unsatisfied with it, and you have to do it better somehow. Like I went Mach 3, no, not fast enough. Mach 4, one Mach 4, 5.5. Why not hypersonic at this point? went 5.5. Why not? Why aren't I going high? I'm going high. Why don't I have a payload? I have a payload. Why don't I have like 10 4K cameras on it? I have like 10 4K cameras. I need to learn active controls. Oh, what's a space shot?
There you go. There you go. That's the spirit.
What is a space shot?
Yeah, Braden.
Let me see if I have something.
A space shot is a rocket that
Yeah, there
goes
we go.
above 100 kilometers.
Oh,
got
that's
it.
what that is.
Got it.
Okay.
Love you, Joe. But it's just like never ending. And then you do it with a solid motor, and then you're like, oh, why don't I do it with a liquid rocket? And then you do it with a liquid rocket, then you're like, well, I got to do all three, so why don't I do it with a hybrid rocket? And then you do a hybrid rocket, and then you're like, why don't I like do a whack corporal? I switch a liquid and a solid. And I'm just like,
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
Boosk. That's the spirit.
it never really ends, for better and for worse.
That's right.
You know, and
We're all
Yeah.
stuck in this hobby,
yeah,
dude.
yeah. But
Yeah.
while we're sitting here, you know, we're on the sideline just watching you do all this. It's entertaining. You're also entertaining us as well. That is fantastic.
And
Thank you,
most
thank you.
importantly, when I post shorts of your rockets, I will make between 80 cents and $1.75. And that's really ultimately what we're all
That needs to
here
go
for.
back to Boosk, Braden.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Well, this won't make any money because people won't subscribe to the podcast channel.
Oh.
Sad. So,
If
sorry.
anyone made
I'll
it
just
this
keep paying
far,
it completely out of pocket to run this show.
we're almost like 2 hours in. So if anyone made it this far, that's crazy.
Honestly, yeah, now's the time to complain. And actually, well, first of all, is this it? Have we reached the end?
It seems to be.
We kind of used question time the entire time. Episode 94, folks, just became the longest episode of the Anti-Gravity Group podcast.
I'm so
no.
sorry.
No,
This-
congrats, Thomas.
no,
you get to hold
well
this.
worth
Yeah.
But
well,
man, thank
well
you.
worth it if you stayed.
Yeah, if there's people still here,
Yeah.
thank you for listening. But thank you, Thomas, for being here. This is really cool. I mean, this is interesting. It's kind of like when they did the liquid demos at Balls, right? Where like we get to see this sort of thing happening all the time because we live 2 hours from far. But
Yeah.
this is like a very foreign concept to a lot of people, the stuff that's going on, and like really fast or really high flying, high performance rockets for not really a lot of money is kind of the entire staple goal of most people in this hobby, right? So
Mhm.
those that are interested, hour 48 in, they're still here. They're the real ones, and that's why every one of you has a car key under your seat. Check. This is just like Oprah. No,
What?
it's not. It's not. I lied.
Way.
I barely
I've
have a
never-
car at this point.
Wow.
Yeah,
You
I
said it
know.
was true, and it's not. I'm
Dude.
suing.
Oh boy.
Dude,
Well,
Shane really needs that car.
What a letdown,
Yeah,
Braden.
dude.
What a letdown. Womp womp.
all right. Everybody wins the free opportunity to subscribe to the Anti-Gravity Group YouTube channel.
Of course.
But I think that's pretty much it. You guys have any further questions?
No, I just want to say thank you, Boosk. That
No.
was really awesome. That was an awesome presentation, and
Thank you.
I think what you're doing is pretty cool. So
This
Thanks
is
a
what
lot.
we missed, Matt, when we went build your rocket instead of going to Thomas's trade.
yeah, I know that was
See, you could have seen it in an hour instead of 2 hours.
The hotel build was good though. Sanding fin components with the concrete outside the hotel. was like-
Sidewalk.
leaving blobs of epoxy on there just to look like fillets, but actually aren't fillets. Yeah, it was.
yeah, it's a beautiful
It
thing.
was a
that
high
was
performing
good.
rocket. Let me tell you what.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Matt,
is
what are you-
nice, Thomas. But did you see Matt's hotel rocket? That's pretty. All right. Well, we don't have any Patreon input or emails to speak of, so that actually works out great. If you still made it here, next week, Aerotech's Joe Hill is joining us. So if you have any questions for him and you're not in the Discord or part of the Patreon, which is free, by the way, it's patreon.com/rocketvlogs to be partaking in these conversations anyway, send us an email to contact@hggpodcast.com. If you have any other questions or comments, my name is Braden Carlson. You can find me right here on YouTube at Rocket Vlogs. You can follow me on Instagram at BigB1011. And I'm kind of back on the TikTok thing. They monetized it. So, like,
Wow.
But
He's
like,
back in.
it's fine. Like, you guys don't have to go follow it if you don't want
Sell
to.
out.
I'm just like spamming TikTok. I uploaded 17 videos at once the other day just to see. and like a few of them got like 500,000 views or something like that, and I got like 2,000 new followers. I was like, wow, this game is stupid, but I'm gonna keep doing it. And yeah,
Talk more like
patreon.com/rocketvlogs. What else does I have? Send us emails. I think I'm pretty much out of stuff, so I think that's Taylor's turn now.
Yeah, my name is Taylor, and you can find me on YouTube at the Rocket Channel.
period.
Real.
LOL.
LOL.
This man's 90.
Yeah, you didn't sound 100 there.
All right,
My name is Shane, or Postart. You can find me on YouTube at Postart Propulsions and online at hprtools.com.
And my name is Macho Matt. You will not find me on TikTok, but you could find me on Facebook, and you'll find me right here. You'll just find me here. That's it.
It's like baiting people now. Thomas, where do you want to point the people?
Let's see. If you're ever at Tripoli Phoenix launch, there's like a 68.9% chance that I'm there.
Nice.
And if you're ever at FAR, there's like a 43% chance I'm there. So just like go enough times and I might be there, but don't go for me, go for Rockets. Yeah. If you search my name, just like Thomas Booska on the interwebs, a couple of things probably comes up. It probably comes up a website that has rockets on it. If you want to read about rockets, there's some rockets on there. There's probably an Instagram. I don't know, follow it or don't. But if you want to like message something, that's not a bad place, but I don't know why you would. There's probably a Twitter. Thank goodness my likes are hidden. I have to be politically agreeable completely. And let's see what else. If you're in engineering or something, I probably have a LinkedIn, and you can probably find me on that absolutely terrible platform. But you know, we're there.
It is so bad,
if anyone,
but so necessary in a lot of ways.
If anyone is still on here, if I know you, please repost memes on LinkedIn. That's the only reason to be on that website. No one actually cares. No one actually cares about
That's
like
true.
Taylor, do you have
anything
LinkedIn?
on that website.
Taylor, do you have LinkedIn?
Join LinkedIn, man.
Do you have a LinkedIn?
I don't think so.
There's no way he does.
Why not?
I'm a construction worker, bro.
Yeah.
I think that is going to have to do it for us, folks. Shane and I have no air conditioning, and it was 102 degrees today, so I'm ready to get the hell out of here. This is the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. We are the Anti-Gravity Group podcast featuring Thomas the Booska today.
Oh no.
And we will see you all next time.
We might just hear from Nigel the Rocket Cat. Load up the professional masterpiece, you can bet on that. A launch and a chat with them is guaranteed to be a blast. It's the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. Ooh, ooh.